This podcast contains adult language and stories of true crime. If you don't like laughing, crying, or being horrified at the actions of other humans, this podcast is not for you.
Welcome to Season 3, Episode 15 of Resolved Mysteries. This is the show... Oh!
Hi!
This is the show where we rewatch, recap, and give you the latest updates to cases featured on the show Unsolved Mysteries. For every review we receive, we donate $1 to a different organization, and this month's organization is the Trans Clippers Project, which was recommended by our patron, Teskier. The Trans Clippers Project, a project jump-started by volunteer collective Imagine Waterworks in New Orleans, is hoping to help dysphoric queer persons in isolation deal with misgendering. The Trans Clippers Project is offering free deliveries of clippers across the U.S. through monetary donations and donations of new clippers. As Psychology Today reported in 2016, more than half of trans-identified people suffer from mental health issues. The gesture is not just a practical solution to a specific problem, it's also an act of community care and kindness in a time when everyone, but particularly marginalized groups such as queer and transgender people of color, have less access to resources. Nice. So thank you, Teskier, for suggesting that.
Yeah. Awesome.
If you would like to support us on Patreon, you'll get access to 2 additional episodes a month and early access to listener short stacks and other content, along with goodies in the mail. You can go to patreon.com/Resolved Mysteries Podcast. All right, everybody, what are we going to be talking about in this episode?
Okay, I have the unexplained death of 13-year-old Russell Evans.
And I have a wanted segment, and it's about William Bradford Bishop Jr.
And I've got my very first treasure, the Lost Adams diggings.
All right, let's do it.
Okay, all right. So last episode, we had the story of a negligent police force, and I'm afraid to say it seems we have another one. Allegedly.
Of course. We should wear t-shirts that say that while we record.
Yes. Yeah, and then just screen cap our podcast every time.
Exactly.
So in Spokane, Washington, at 1:05 a.m. in the morning of June 4th, 1989, 13-year-old Russell Evans was found lying in the street after what looked like a hit-and-run accident. Sandy Ferris jumped out of the car to help, and her friend ran to call 911. As they waited for paramedics to arrive, Russell repeatedly called out to someone named Brian for help. At 1:30 a.m., he was taken to Sacred Heart Hospital, where doctors tried to save his life. Russell's mother, Sue, reenacts going in the hospital room and holding her son's hand, which is just so sad, and I do not know how she did that because the boy playing Russell is all bruised. He's being bagged with oxygen. It had to have been so re-traumatizing.
Seriously, I could not believe it again. And it looked like she got real emotional in it.
Yes.
You know?
Yes. I'm glad they let her in if that's what she wanted. But I am also surprised that would never, ever, ever, ever happen today.
No.
So the doctors do eventually tell her that maybe it'd be best for her and for Russell if she waits in the waiting room so that they can keep working. Doctors work through the night, but at 9:10 the next morning, Russell Evans died of his injuries. So immediately, the police in Spokane ruled that Russell Evans died after being struck by a car. But his family believes that he wasn't hit by a car and that he was actually the victim of a beating by a teenage street gang he had encountered. So a little bit more about Russell. He was an 8th grader at Libby Middle School in Spokane, Washington. He was really tall for his age. He was already 6'3". And he had plans to play basketball at UCLA in college. So there's a few talking heads in this segment. Sandy Ferris is one of them. She's the eyewitness who found Russell, thankfully, and her friend called for help. So she was with him in some of his last moments
She was
out of
nice.
the hospital. She's so sweet.
Yeah.
And we'll hear a little bit more about her later. And then there's also one of Russell's good friends, Aaron Abramson, who's also a sweetie.
Mm-hmm.
And he's on there and he says, quote, "We did everything together." And this is just a year after the death that we're going to see him interviewed. "We did everything together. He was at my house every day and he was very well liked. He had a good sense of humor and he got along with pretty much everybody. He had no problems."
Mm-hmm.
So they show reenactment of Russell playing basketball with his friends. He just seems like a very normal 13-year-old, except he's very tall. But he seemed to be well liked at his school. So on the night of June 3rd, Russell was hanging out at a park with his friend Aaron and others. Two older kids walked up to them and began to threaten Aaron. Something about his girlfriend. There's different reports about that, and that's not actually in the UM segment, but I later learned or heard a couple different things about Aaron had a girlfriend, and one of these older teenage boys wanted that to be his girlfriend, or the girlfriend had given Aaron her number, and it was the teenage boy's girlfriend. It's hard to tell.
Okay.
So the argument starts to turn physical and Russell intervenes. And of course, Russell's really tall and he actually might look older than his age too.
Mm-hmm.
So then the boys threatened Russell and said, one of them said, "I'm going to send my homeboys on you." That's one of the reports says that. Again, oh yeah, I think it did say that in UM too.
It did, yeah.
It did.
So the teenagers drive off, and Russell and his friends spend the rest of the evening at another friend's house until Russell left around midnight. He called his father before leaving and told him he was heading home. A few minutes after leaving the friend's house, he ran into another friend, Sid, S-E-Y-D, who was the last person of the people that knew him to see him alive. So I don't know why all these Spokane children are just running around in the middle of the night.
Yeah. 13 years old and out until midnight?
That was my biggest question. And he was like jogging.
Well,
Yeah.
he was jogging home, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably
But
for
still.
safety, I guess, but still, like...
Well, they didn't say he ran home. They said he was jogging. And I was like, what the fuck?
Yeah, I think he was like jogging home.
I don't know.
But yeah.
So
My bedtime was at like 9 p.m. until I was like 15 or something.
I do not understand.
My mother would have never, ever in 8th grade let me out on the streets at midnight. She knew better. Like, what?
Yeah. That's what a lot of people, like sitcoms online is just full of like, okay, but the real question is, why are these children running the streets of Spokane in the middle of the night?
Maybe because it's Spokane and
maybe.
like nothing's really happening.
So authorities, of course, this is the authorities. They believe that minutes after Russell left from talking to his friend Sade, he was struck from behind by an unknown vehicle, possibly a pickup truck. So then we see our first very nonchalant police officer, and he's Spokane Police Lieutenant James Hill. He says, on impact with the vehicle, he was separated from his shoes. He finally came to rest about 75 feet from where we think he was struck. Then forensic pathologist George Lindholm concluded that Russell was likely struck in the back by a bumper, and they tell the family that, and Russell's father, John Evans, had a different opinion. He says, "We looked at him after he died, and I thought he had been in a fight. Later on, when the police started talking about hit and run, his mom and I just couldn't buy that. The injuries weren't there." So you heard the lieutenant say something about his shoes.
Yeah.
So Russell was found next to the median strip on Thor Avenue, less than 2 blocks from his home. His shoes were found downhill from that, 86 feet away. And then the weirdest part is that his shoelaces were separated from his shoes.
Yeah.
And they look like regular white Keds Converse, not high top, but just, it's just so weird.
Yeah. When I saw the shoes, they only had 2 holes each, like 2 holes going up. And I was like, that makes a little bit more sense.
Right. That they're not like.
What could possibly happen physics wise to make that happen? I cannot rationalize it no matter which way I think about it.
No. Unless someone was going to use the shoelaces to like tie him or something, but why wouldn't they just have their own shoelaces or bring something? I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very weird. So 3 pools of blood, like large pools of blood, were also found approximately 50 feet away from where his body was found. And those pools of blood did not make sense since he had supposedly been thrown far away. So how was he thrown 3 different times? Like, why was his body in 3 different places pooling blood until he was finally found in a totally different spot on the street?
Yeah.
So John and Sue Evans, in the middle of mourning their child, as we see so many people having to do, then also have to do their own investigation. And they obtained copies of the official police report, and there were also photographs. They noted that Russell's shoes didn't have their laces, like I said. It looked like they had been torn out. And to Russell's parents, that seemed like an important clue. And John also noticed that there was blood on the shoelace. So he says, now tell me, how do you get blood on the shoelace if you're struck and driven out of your shoes and thrown 50 feet down the hill? If you're struck and thrown out of your shoes, your body is so quickly leaving your shoes that there wouldn't be time to bleed on them.
Mm-hmm.
So the Evanses returned to the scene of the accident with Sandy Ferris, and they show this being reenacted. And it's the 3 of them going to the scene, and she's pointing out where she thinks she originally saw Russell. Because the Evanses learned that the exact spot where Russell's body was found had not been marked. So in the police report, there's no exact spot where there's just a lot of feet. Like, it was this many feet away from where his shoes were, blah, 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 but not an exact marking of where his body was found. So John and Sue became convinced that their son had been struck by something other than a hit-and-run driver, and they hired their own pathologist to investigate. So their pathologist did say that it looked like Russell had been hit by a car, but he also told John that he found significant evidence of a struggle.
Yeah.
So John says, this pathologist came back to us with the findings that Russell had been in a physical altercation prior to his death. If a body flies through the air, when that body hits the pavement, there would be massive scraping. Russell did not have any scraping on his body.
Oh, that's a really good... That makes me think of, like, Lee Selwyn. Like,
yes. Yeah, so anytime you're hit by a car, like road rash is going to be on the skin.
Yeah.
So based on their research, Russell's father, John, reconstructed his son's final moments and says, I think it was a fight going back up the hill. According to his hands, he got his own licks in, so he's trying to fight back.
Yeah.
And then Russell had finger bruises on his face and the side of his nose, and finger bruising on his upper arms, as though he were being held. So there's reenactment of a fight where multiple people are involved in fighting Russell and holding him. And then the show also just does a reenactment of Russell being hit by a car to show both ideas. So due to the allegations that the Evanses were trying to put forward, the boys involved in the altercation with Russell and Aaron at the park were given polygraph tests, and they all passed. Or they both passed. Sandy Ferris, who's the eyewitness who found Russell at the scene, claimed Russell was calling out to someone for help that night. So she says, when I first got there, the first thing I asked him was what happened, and he started calling for Brian. He said it more like the person was in listening distance, that his friend should have been right there with him. After the police got there and they started to put Russell in the ambulance, we saw a boy in white shorts up in the bushes, and he was running up the hill. I tried to tell the policeman this a couple times, but he kept telling me to get on the sidewalk. I thought maybe that could have been Brian. So this is weirdly reenacted. It's like a boy hiding behind a tree, and then when Sandy Ferris turns to see him, he runs away. So that makes it look very much like someone was watching the whole time until he was seen and then tries to run away. Who knows if it was really like that, if that's just how it was shot. So John Evans, Russell's father, says that Russell had a friend named Brian, and he asks Brian if he knew anything and what he was wearing that night. And Brian said, well, I was wearing white shorts and a white t-shirt, but I was nowhere around. And then later, when the police questioned Brian, he denied owning that kind of outfit at all. So that was
So
really weird
weird.
for John, especially.
Yeah.
So police speculate. They try and just like blow it off. They say the man Sandy saw running off was simply a curious citizen that heard all the commotion and the sirens and went out to take a look. But why would he run away? He would just be standing there. He wouldn't be hiding behind a tree.
Yeah.
But, and then the weirdest part about this is when Sue Evans arrived at the hospital to see Russell, the nurse secretary says, do you want any, this is also before like HIPAA, I guess, because she says, do you want me to update anyone on his condition if they call? And the mom says no. And she says, well, someone named Brian already has called asking how he is.
That's bananas.
It's so weird. And
Yeah,
Sue,
I didn't
the mom,
expect
is
that.
like, that's really weird. Like, we just found out about this. There's no reason anyone else should know about it unless they were there.
Yep.
So he has a friend named Brian. He's calling the name Brian, and a person named Brian called to check up on him.
Yes.
Yep.
Come on.
So we're all looking very suspicious for Brian.
Yes.
He might not have been involved, but like it seems like he knows about it and
No,
will provide answers.
My thought was never that he was involved, just that he was there and he was afraid of whoever was involved.
Exactly. Which is a terrible position. Also, he's a child, so that's awful.
Yes. He's
These
a
kids are
child who's
eighth
probably
graders.
not 5 feet.
Eighth graders.
Yes,
You know? They're babies.
Yeah.
Yeah, if they see what these people do to someone who's 6'3", like taller than most grown men, then it would be scary.
Mm-hmm.
So Sue Evans says, who would have known about this unless somebody named Brian was at the scene who he was calling for? And John says there may be one or two people that know more than they're telling, and the reason they're probably not telling is that they are afraid for their lives. So evidence from the scene fully convinced Russell's parents that he had been attacked and murdered, while the police believed Russell was the victim of a hit and run, and that's about where the segment ends.
Yeah.
In the reenactment of the fight, what is shown is a Russell like jogging along the street and then a car pulling up next to him from behind and hitting him with a bat and sort of disarming him in that way, and then the fight ensues. So a few more pieces of evidence from the scene and autopsy that the segment didn't mention are that Russell's socks were never found.
Oh.
So his socks were not on his body, and they were not found at the scene.
Weird.
So those that believe it was a fight, like his parents, think that the socks were discarded by police because they would have been bloody, maybe proving that there was a fight.
Oh my goodness. Whoa.
And then the autopsy also showed evidence of a blow from behind, which broke Russell's spine.
So like the bat.
Yes. Yes. Although the police tried to say that's from a car.
Yeah.
But it seems like if a car were driving up behind him, it's 89. Cars are not quiet. It's the dead of night. He would have heard a car driving up behind him. He would have at least turned around and been struck on the side or the front.
Yeah.
Not like dead in the back.
Yeah.
Unless he was already aware of them and running from them.
That's true. Yeah. And like I said earlier, there was also no scraping on his body, which would have been consistent with someone being hit by a car and then falling and sliding on the pavement.
Yeah, that's the big one now.
Yeah. So the Evanses pathologist that they hired said that he found evidence of a fight on the body, but the friend Sade, who ran into Russell right before all this happened, said he did not look like he'd been in a fight at all. So it wasn't like that fight. They wanted them to know that so that no one could say, well, maybe he was in a fight before heading home and then he got hit by a car.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the finger marks and bruising on his face also do not match with just being hit by a car. They seem like evidence of a fight and like they're being held. And for you to bruise because someone is holding you, they're holding you so tight and you're struggling. So I also learned through further research and Robin Warder's episode of The Trail Went Cold about this case from 2016. It's a little mini-sode that he does, and it's awesome. So thank you, Robin. And he said that the teens that were given the polygraph, that was true, but that they were then reported to later have been bragging about how they took muscle relaxers before the polygraph.
Whoa.
And they were then later arrested for stealing electronics. So they're like in some kind of probably like organized crime situation is what that insinuates.
Wow.
So there are talks of youth gangs in the area, as well as more serious gangs like Bloods and Crips. So the threat of, quote, sending homeboys out to get Russell does line up a little bit. Although, of course, we can't say for sure that it was a gang incident. So the case is still unsolved. Despite someone coming forward in 1996 claiming, and this is actually on tape, that one of the suspects, one of the teenagers, said, quote, "Man, I screwed up. I ended up killing that boy that night." And this witness says, "What happened?" And he didn't tell me the full details, but he ended up running him over. And then the person telling police this says, "I remember vividly. He told me that what I did was I hit him. Once I hit him, backed up and ran over him." But this doesn't match with the lack of scraping on the body. Right. He said he tried to put on like he didn't mean to do it, is what this person is saying. And then later, the group that were responsible apparently discussed an alibi. And they said, if we see the police, to go on ahead and cover for him and say that he was with us. He had talked to me. He had told me at that moment of time. I mean, nobody ever came and approached us as far as an officer. Nobody came and asked us. He's talking about the peripheral friend group.
Yeah.
Were not asked. But when this information came out, the Evans family was like, see, this is just, maybe there is something to this. And so they started posting $5,000 reward posters throughout Spokane, hoping to solve the case. But despite the new witness coming forward, the police continued to insist it was a hit and run. And there was even a small protest in Spokane to have the police reinvestigate the case, but they wouldn't.
Wow. Oh my God.
So sadly, both of Russell's parents have passed away. His father died not long after that in 1998, and I have a little more information about that. And his mother passed away in 2011.
Oh my God.
So another thing that Robin found that then I was able to dig up that hadn't come up in like my original searches was that on October 28th of 2016, so pretty recently, a post was made to Spokane's Craigslist about having one of the murderers confess to the crime. And that page is no longer available, but someone copied and pasted the post. Oh my God. Hold on. Let me let him out. He just wants to get
let him out. He's like banging into your equipment and
I
stuff.
know. Hold on. Sorry. You can't do that. Okay. Oh God. I'll start again.
So many animals.
So sadly, both of Russell's parents are now deceased. His father died not long after that new witness came forward in 1998, and his mother, Sue, passed away in 2011. And I have a little bit more about his father a little bit later. So one of the things that Robin's episode also helped me find that I didn't come up with in my original search because it's really buried now. But on October 28th of 2016, a post was made to Spokane's Craigslist about one of the murderers apparently confessing to the crime. And this posting has been deleted by the author, but someone copied and pasted what it said to the Russell Evans page on Sitcoms Online.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Yes. So this was posted by El Divino, and they just say, I found this today. So the Craigslist post, they posted this in October of 2016. They say, I found this today. And the Craigslist post said, in 1989, Russell Evans was killed by ex-Ferris high school students. One of them told me he did it, and he graduated from Ferris in 1988. Robin is just using their initials, and I'm going to do that same thing because it names names and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
This is how I was told for what happened, which killed Russell Evans. A 4-door car full with 4 18 to 20-year-old young adults sitting in the back seats of that car was a D, and the killer, TJ. TJ told me they were driving down the hill and they saw a tall kid walking on the side of the road. And TJ said they just wanted to scare the kid. The car pulled up next to Russell Evans like the Dukes of Hazzard and grabbed a hold of Russell Evans and took off down the hill, holding Russell Evans along the side of the car.
Oh my God.
When the car took off down the hill, holding onto Russell Evans, Russell's long legs went back and under the rear wheel of the car. While Russell Evans was being held by TJ through the back door window of the car, and Russell Evans' feet were ran over by the rear wheel. That is how Russell Evans' shoe was found at the top of the hill and how the shoe had come off.
That was the only thing I came up with, was if only his feet got run over. But I was like, how could that possibly happen from if he's being hit by a car striking him?
Right.
Oh my God.
And then this says, that is how Russell Evans' shoe was found at the top of the hill. At the bottom of the hill, TJ let Russell Evans go, and that is where Russell Evans died. Remember that Russell Evans was a tall 12-year-old. Some people say he was 12, some say he was 13. Mm-hmm. That maybe was thought to be older because of his height. TJ, a year after Russell Evans' murder, had gone to Washington's Walla Walla State Prison for around 7 years for an assault charge. TJ is the murderer who told me he was involved with what is said above. You can even ask TJ's girlfriend, H. I'm sure he told her. Also, if anyone would like to debate me on what I was told, then why don't you first do forensics on the 2 shoes found on the hill for tire rubber? Or do those shoes exist today in Spokane's Unsolved Murder Evidence Department? Or could it be a cover-up? Because you don't see the reward poster that was on the wall inside Spokane's South Hills Round Table Pizza on Regal Street. TJ showed me that framed reward poster at the pizza place after he said what happened to Russell Evans. So, who knows? That still seems like the scraping still doesn't match up with that. And the blow from behind doesn't necessarily match up with that either. But apparently this Craigslist post was sent to Unsolved Mysteries or unsolved.com, and they forwarded it on to the Spokane police. So I think they quote unquote looked into it, but nothing more has come from that.
Hmm.
So some people on Reddit are saying, yeah, the shoes should be tested. And then are there any pieces of evidence even left? Like now things have come along so far with DNA. Could they try and get touch DNA off the clothes?
Yeah.
And also it doesn't seem like they ever tested the pools of blood on the street. And if they had, maybe they would have found that it was at least, maybe they wouldn't have found the DNA because they didn't have that then, but did they at least find that it could have been more than one person's blood if there was a fight? So on that same Reddit thread I was just talking about, then someone posted this posting. It says, "Hi, my name is Callie. My mother, Sandy Ferris, was the one that found Russell Evans. My friend Kelly was the one that found this site for me to post to. I just got done reading your reply to her questioning about the Spokane death. Growing up with my mom being on this show and living in Spokane for almost my whole life, I have heard lots of different ideas about what happened that night. My brother and I have had all sorts of friends there, friends that know people that know the truth about that night. We have heard that it is gang-related and that the two guys that Russell got into a fight with earlier that night were in fact part of a gang. Russell's friend Brian, from what we heard, was part of this gang that killed Russell. There are people, Brian included, that know the real truth of what happened that night. At the time of the death, my brother was the same height as Russell. Our mom, Sandra Ferris, had my brother stand in front of a car. If Russell was hit by a hit-and-run driver, his knees would have been broken, and they weren't. So we also believe that he was not killed by a hit-and-run driver, but by a gang of Spokane. My mother is no longer alive. She passed away in 2003. Till the day of her own death, she was haunted by what happened that night. But she is in heaven with Russell now, and she can rest at ease knowing the truth, something she has wanted since that horrible night." And then the same person posted a little farther down this posting. "This is Brian, and I can say that I was in no gang, nor was Russ. However, there were Crips and Bloods in Spokane and smaller gangs stemming from those. I see that a lot of people have watched the episode about Russell's death and have made several speculations as to the cause. My family and I moved about a year after Russ passed, before the taping of the episode, and the show made no effort to contact me regarding any circumstances they made or referred to about me. I was happy when I heard that Russ's case was going to be on Unsolved Mysteries, although I do have one problem with the airing. I was with Russ earlier that day playing basketball at a friend's house along with others. Then a few of us went back to Russ's house afterwards. Later on that night, some of us went to the bowling alley where we frequented often. There was a small scuffle which didn't involve Russ at all. It wasn't much later that I separated from Russ. So as I was at home sleeping, I get a call from a friend whom told me that Russ had been killed. I think this was around 5 a.m. So what makes me upset about the episode is that it appears they have the same person reenacting me playing basketball with Russ earlier, and that same person reenacting the person the paramedics say they saw in the distance. As for Russ calling out for Brian, well, I'll just leave that one alone. I liked Russell Evans very much and still miss him. If I knew or ever did know what happened that night, I wouldn't lie, but I would also like to give my thoughts to his family. I was told that a few years after Russ died, his father died too. Okay, I'm almost done. So then this person says, wow, I am so surprised and kind of happy that people are still talking about this. I am Russell's little sister, and I am sure, for everyone wondering, that was Brian posting previously. I saw him posting on a Facebook page about it and asked him to take it down. He said he took it down out of respect. I know Brian was there and knows what happened. That is not a question in my mind. At this time in the investigation, I am more interested in having the Spokane police officers responsible for this botched investigation brought to justice.
Wow.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's wild.
So then, speaking of that sister, As recently as February 13th, 2020, she is still working on finding justice for her brother. So
Wow.
there's an article in a Spokane newspaper. Oh, and also, so her name is Diana Gulick, and she is a therapist in Spokane. She's a queen.
Mm-hmm.
And this article says, on June 4th, 1989, Diana Gulick lost her only sibling, her 13-year-old brother, Russ Evans. He was very loving, Gulick remembers. He was a great big brother, and he protected me. Gulick wasn't there when a driver along 13th and Ray found Russ lying in the road crying for help. She was just 5 years old at the time, but she does remember the next morning. My mom had me come and sit on her lap, and she told me very slowly, which I thought was helpful instead of dropping it on me. I remember crying and the funeral that followed. The funeral was actually on my mother's birthday.
Oh, God.
Oh my God.
Much of what Gulick knows of that time comes from a journal she found after her mom passed away. She had kept the journal for her daughter during the worst time of their lives. One of the entries said, I got a call from your school. You needed me, so I came and got you. You cried and cried. You talked about how sad you were that Russ was gone. You wanted to know if he was looking both ways when he crossed the street. You said many times it wasn't fair that Russell died.
Oh, my God.
It's so horrible. He says, it instilled a fear in me at a very young age that for any reason, someone could kill you. You wouldn't know why, and you wouldn't know who did it. So there's a little more in the article. We'll post all the sources on our website, but a little further down, she says that her father's obsession with the case drove him to substance abuse and an early grave. When she lost her mom, she also came to terms with her brother's death, but she's determined now to pick up the fight. While her memory of that time is still fresh, she knows it must be for other people too. Quote, because it's been 30 years, maybe some of the people who have been scared to come forward might feel obligated and safe enough to do that. When you read the report, the evidence just stacks and stacks and stacks. There is DNA in this case, but that DNA hasn't been tested. With no cold case detective in the Spokane Police Department, there just isn't anyone who can pay full attention to old cases like this. Can you believe that? She has written to every Spokane council member and also the mayor, hoping the city will dedicate resources to cold case homicides and sexual assaults. Quote, even if something could come of this and we could get just one detective who's assigned cold cases. From what I understand, the suspects still live in Spokane. I'm sharing the city with someone who murdered my brother, who was a child. You know who you are. You know who you were with that night. It's clear from the evidence I've read you don't trust each other very much. If you are the last to come to the table, your options will be very limited. This isn't over. And that article ends with, if you have any information about the Russ Evans homicide, call Crime Check at 509-456-2233. So that's basically all for this Russell Evans case. It's so solvable and so frustrating that it's not solved. I mentioned last episode when we were like, oh, there's another Spokane case. So I found this article from 1990, October of 1990, that is reporting that the show is coming back. And the headline is, Mysteries Show Continues Feasting on Spokane Cases. TV crews are back in town to document teenagers' death.
Wow.
And it says, production crews for the television show Unsolved Mysteries are in Spokane to produce a segment about the June 1989 death of teenager Russell Evans, the sixth time the show has reenacted a local event.
Wow.
Things, but it says the company produces the popular weekly show aired on NBC TV. The show recreates unsolved crimes in the hopes viewers will provide police with new leads. Quote, Spokane, for some reason, is the most visited city we've been to create segments for the show, said director Laura Patterson.
It really is.
So,
and then remember when we first started this, we kept wondering why they were in Medford so much.
Mhm.
We found that article where they would just go on location and then talk to law enforcement, and then organically law enforcement would say, oh, we've got another case, or oh, we've got another case. But it seems like with something like this, it wasn't law enforcement. It was probably the family.
yeah.
So
Like,
it is
I don't
strange that they keep finding their way back there.
Right, because you'd think law enforcement doesn't want them digging into this one since they've just always stuck with it's a hit and run.
Mm-hmm.
And won't
Yeah.
look at anything.
Man.
Wow.
The Brian thing is really weird. I feel that if he was suffering injuries in the street, he may not have been in his right mind, and he may have just been calling out a name he knew.
Yeah,
You know, or just placing his mind in a place that it wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
very true.
But the calling the hospital is the weird.
Yeah. For me, it's calling the hospital.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Even more so than him possibly being seen. Yeah.
Yeah.
And why is the sister so positive that Brian was there? Because she was a little child when this happened.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's got to be something more there. It's the call for the hospital that does it for me.
Yeah.
Like, what are the odds that it isn't his friend Brian that's calling to see? You know, it just doesn't add up.
Yeah.
Wow.
And who else
What
would
a
call to
case.
see except someone who had been there? Because
Exactly.
know about it yet.
And you would.
Yeah.
If you were like a 12-year-old or 13-year-old kid,
Mhm.
you wouldn't realize that the nurse secretary is going to tell the mom you called. You just would not think about that at all. You'd feel you might feel really guilty, and you might just need to know how he is and if he died.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep. I agree.
You wouldn't future think that at all.
Yeah. Wow. Good job.
Yeah.
Poor thing.
That's
So sad.
sad and frustrating.
Yeah. All right, you guys ready? Does everybody have their wine and their blankets?
Yes.
Okay, listeners, this is a very, very long segment. So this is a wanted segment, and it is about a man named William Bradford Bishop Jr., who went by
Got a lot of names going on.
Yeah, the more names, the better. And he went by Brad Bishop, so we'll refer to him as Brad. March 2nd, 1976, in Columbia, North Carolina, a state park ranger responded to an urgent report of a brush fire in a remote wooded area. As the ranger brought the fire under control, he found the disturbing calling cards of an arsonist, an empty gas can, and a shovel. When the smoke cleared, the ranger was shocked to discover the evidence of murder as well. In a shallow grave, he found the remains of 5 partially charred bodies, 3 young boys and 2 women.
Horrible.
Stack says the thorough investigation of the shocking crime turned up few clues. 2 articles of the victim's clothing bore the labels of expensive department stores in Bethesda, Maryland, a suburb of Washington, D.C. The shovel also came from a hardware store in the same area, but Bethesda police had no missing persons reports that they could link to the bodies until 6 days later. Lieutenant Joe Sargent, so it's Lieutenant Sargent,
I know.
of the yeah. I was like, wait, what is his name? It's Lieutenant Sargent.
Yeah.
Born for the job, apparently.
Mm-hmm.
Of the Montgomery County Police Department is interviewed, and he tells us that on March 8th, 1976, he received a radio call to investigate the absence of 5 persons from a residence in Bethesda. A neighbor of the Bishop family had called the police after not seeing any member of the family for at least a week. She told Lieutenant Sargent that it wasn't unusual for the Bishops to go out of town, but they usually told her because she would collect the newspapers for them and water their plants while they were gone. Lieutenant Sargent says it was a routine investigation. He wasn't overly concerned about it until he reached the front steps of the home and saw that there were blood droplets on the top step. When he unlocked the door, he saw blood droplets leading from the doorway through the foyer and to a set of stairs that led to the upstairs where the bedrooms were. As he went up the stairs, he observed more blood droplets on the wall, and without going further into the scene, he looked in a bedroom and saw that almost the entire ceiling and wall was completely splattered with blood.
Gross.
He said there was hardly a place you could put your hand where there wasn't blood spatter.
Oh, that was just.
because this story is so old and so much information has been released, I saw some crime scene photos for both the house and where the bodies were, and they're pretty tough
Oh,
to
wow.
look at. We will not be posting them. Lieutenant Sargent says he had been a police officer for approximately 10 years at this point, and this was the worst scene he had ever observed. Authorities were finally able to identify the 5 bodies found the week prior in North Carolina. The victims were Ann Bishop, her 3 sons, and her mother-in-law. In the segment, they don't say the names of all of the victims. And then when I started researching this, in quite a few articles I read, they didn't give the full names either, but these were people. They weren't just family members to a murderer. So their names were Annette Catherine Bishop, 37, and her sons William Bradford Bishop III, who was 14, Brenton Germain Bishop, 10, Jeffrey Corder Bishop, 5, and then Lobelia Amaryllis Bishop, 68.
Wow, what a floral name.
Oh my goodness. The best name I think I've ever heard. I love it.
Those are both flowers.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
I knew the amaryllis was. I didn't know lobelia.
Mm-hmm.
So 5 family members are dead. Who's missing? William Bradford Bishop Jr., an economist with the State Department. Stack tells us that there was no sign of Brad Bishop. Stack says the Bishops, who seemed to be such a perfect family, had been ripped apart by unfathomable violence. From what I read, it's suspected that a lot of the blood in that bedroom came from William Bradford Bishop III. He was beaten so badly that his face was missing, basically.
Oh, my God.
It's theorized that he fought the killer and got the brunt of the attack. Like I said, I found crime scene and autopsy photos, and I was able to locate autopsy photos for the other 4 victims, but not for William. So I don't think that they were ever released because of the condition of his head.
Yeah.
Stack tells us that Brad Bishop grew up in Pasadena, California. In 1959, he graduated from Yale right after college. Brad married his high school sweetheart, Annette Weiss. And by the mid-70s, the couple had 3 sons, and Brad was the State Department Director of Commercial Practices and Trade. To most of his coworkers, Brad seemed like he was on a fast track to a high-level State Department job, but at least one coworker saw a different side of Brad Bishop. They interview a man named Roy A. Harrell Jr. He's Brad's colleague, and he says that Brad Bishop had extensive experience overseas. He said that Brad liked the international scene from the time he was in the army in Italy. Brad's career was very much on track, although he was exceedingly despondent about not getting a promotion. This is according to Harrell. Stack says that Brad Bishop and Roy Harrell ran into each other just outside of the State Department on the day the annual promotion list came out. Harrell says that Bishop... Sorry, this is what I have in my script. Harrell says that Bishop was kind of a dick to him and then apologized for it. Basically, Bishop is complaining about not getting a promotion. Harrell says, I didn't get a promotion either. And then Bishop is like, well, I'm way more qualified than you. He's a dick. Yeah. But then Harrell looks like a little upset. And then Bishop says, oh, I'm really sorry. I think I'm getting the flu, so I'm leaving work early today. There was also a report that I read later of another coworker who saw Bishop around the same time that wasn't included in the segment. So on March 17th, 1976, Bishop's supervisor, William Clark, was interviewed, and he had absolutely no reason to believe anything was wrong with Bishop. He says the last time he saw him was the afternoon that the family was murdered at 5 p.m., when Bishop indicated that he was feeling, quote, weird, and he was coming down with the flu. Bishop indicated at the time that he felt he would be back in the office no later than Thursday, so a couple days later. Clark said that Bishop was disappointed for not having been on the last promotion list and had mentioned that his 1974 tax return was being audited, but Clark did not feel that either of these things was particularly bothering Bishop. Also in the report, it is mentioned that when Roy Harrell ran into Bishop at the State Department, it was Friday, February 27th, 1976. He says that Bishop was quite despondent over not having made the promotion list, but that contradicts what Bishop's supervisor stated when he was interviewed, and he saw Bishop later than Harrell did, so that presumes that he had already decided to kill his family. Stack says that the next day, the Bishop's family would be found dead in North Carolina. So on March 18th, almost 3 weeks after the murders, a ranger at the Great Smoky Mountains National Park in Tennessee discovered an abandoned station wagon. In the back, he found what appeared to be dried blood. The car was registered to William Bradford Bishop, and a warrant was issued for his arrest for homicide. The FBI believes that they have pieced together Bishop's activities leading up to the murders. On the day he left the State Department, Bishop withdrew $400 from his bank account, which is about $1,700 today. He went to a local hardware store and bought a shovel and a mallet, and then went to a gas station and filled a gas can. He got home around 7 or 8 p.m. I read, though, that now they think the murders happened closer to 11 p.m., which is why the children, including 14-year-old William, were most likely asleep. Because I thought it was strange in the segment, they said that the children were in bed at between 7 and 8, which a 14-year-old doesn't, I mean, a 10-year-old doesn't go to bed at 7 p.m.
No.
My 4-year-old doesn't go to bed at 7 p.m. So when I think later on, they realized that the murder happened a little bit later. But they theorized that Annette was killed first. In his interview, Assistant Special Agent for the FBI in Baltimore, Wiley D. Thompson III, says that a book was found near Annette, and she was sitting in a chair. Then they think he murdered his mother next as she came in from walking the family dog. I read in the book, Killer in the Family, that I'll be referencing throughout this, that something, a sight, a sound, a fright, apparently prompted Lobelia to lock herself into a bathroom. Brad easily cracked the door frame and soon left his 68-year-old mother dead on the floor, still wearing the coat that she was wearing while she walked the dog. But she only had a bruise on her forehead. So a medical examiner noted later that she might have been smothered or she might have literally died of fright.
Oh my.
And then he murdered the boys. And like I said, based on the wounds, it's likely that 14-year-old William fought back. Special Agent Thompson says they were all killed with a blunt instrument. According to the FBI, Bishop loaded the 5 bodies into the family station wagon and left Bethesda. He headed 200 miles south to a sparsely populated countryside in Columbia, North Carolina. Lieutenant Joe Sargent says he believes it was a crime of passion and that certain people just flip. I disagree. A crime of passion doesn't mean you stop to get the murder weapon and gasoline. I believe that Bishop was planning this for a while, and not getting the promotion was what we now know as a trigger event. That's what we call it. Roy Harrell says that Bishop felt like he was lacking, and the feeling was nourished by his wife and mother, who constantly told him he was inadequate and washed up and wasn't going anywhere in his career. This statement felt very strange to me. Because from everything I read about Bishop, he was much too arrogant to ever let anyone in his circle know his personal weaknesses. So I kind of struggle with the idea that Bishop would ever admit to anyone, let alone, Harrell is referred to as a colleague. That's a coworker. I doubt that he would confess that his mother and his wife thought of him as a failure. So it just seems like really out of character based on everything that we know about Brad Bishop. So I'm like a little wary of this statement. At the same time, I read in the book Killer in the Family that a secretary was interviewed years later, and she told investigators that she thought Brad's mother and wife were, quote, running his life. So I guess he did get personal with coworkers. I don't know. It just seems like super weird to me that somebody who acts like Brad Bishop would be like, oh, my wife and my mother think that I'm a failure. Like, I just can't see that, but I don't know. There's a lot about this case where you're just like, what? So the FBI believes that Bishop bought a pair of tennis shoes near the site of the fire, and this is the last confirmed sighting of him. And then he drove 400 miles to the Great Smoky Mountains in Tennessee, where his car was found abandoned. Special Agent Thompson says that Bishop had plenty of time to escape. He says there was no indication of suicide and that there was no indication of an accident, so they believe that he walked away from his car in the Smoky Mountains.
Yeah, because there's kind of like 2 routes you go. It's either you find them dead of a gunshot wound at the scene of all the murders, or they're gone.
Exactly. Stack says that Bishop successfully covered his tracks and was not seen for 2 years. I have to caveat this statement. After he bought the tennis shoes, that confirmed sighting, there was never a confirmed sighting of Bishop again.
Wow.
So moving forward, any sightings we hear about are completely unconfirmed. So Stack tells us that in 1978, 5,000 miles away on a different continent, Roy Harrell claims he came face to face with Bishop in Sorrento, Italy. Harrell says that he was at the Piazza Tasso Square in Sorrento boarding a bus for Rome. You're laughing already?
I'm sorry. This reenactment.
I know.
Yeah.
Honey. Okay. Go on.
I know it. I feel it in my bones. It's so bad.
The most dramatic.
It is mortifying. I was embarrassed for all parties involved. So Harold claims that he went into the bathroom before getting on the bus, and as he was washing his hands, a bearded, disheveled man came in.
Wearing a terrible wig. Still in season 3, our wigs are terrible.
Yeah. Not a bigger wig budget.
He looks like Grizzly Adams or so. It's out of control. It's so bad. It's so bad. So Harold says he recognized Brad through the beard and disheveled clothing.
Which you would. You would recognize somebody that you knew that well.
Like that well.
Yeah. If you put dirt on their face and put them in a potato sack, you would still recognize them. So sure.
Mm-hmm.
Harold says to the man, "You're Brad Bishop, right? Brad, why don't you get on the bus with me and come back to Rome?" Okay,
God.
so
And then
and then after Harold suggests getting on the bus, Bishop says, "Oh my God, no!" and goes booking out of that bathroom.
knocking over every piece of furniture there's
Oh my
ever
God.
been.
They had a bigger breakable prop budget because they had to, because everything was knocked over and broken.
What?
Everything.
Okay. How was there so many things to smash? Where is this catastrophe coming from? Like,
Even the way he ran, it was like this wide-legged duck walk that he
God.
It's like,
It's
what is happening?
It's a bathroom in a bus station. It's not like Tiffany and Company. Like, where is all of this shit coming
Not a
from?
museum.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
They're like Italy fancy. They probably have a ton of stuff in those bathrooms. So Harold then chases after this man. Okay, can we also, what if this man was not Bishop? This American man is yelling at this Italian man to get on a bus with him to Rome. And then when the man gets upset and runs away, this American man chases him.
Yes.
Horrifying.
That's terrifying. Oh. Harold follows this man, Bishop, or a poor innocent Italian man, and chases him up the stairs, follows him down this piazza corridor or whatever. And then he says he watches the man disappear to a boat landing where the boats go to Capri. It's just like, okay. Harold, killing me. Okay, so Stack asks, did Brad Bishop brutally murder his own family? Unless Brad Bishop is found, the truth will remain unknown. Stack then gives stats. Bishop is fluent in French, Italian, and Serbo-Croatian and holds a diplomatic passport. And at the time of the murders, he was 40 years old. They show an aged computer-generated sketch to show what he would look like at 54. And Bishop was tried in absentia of the crimes and found guilty on 5 counts of first-degree murder and other charges. And then there is no update. So our listeners who are into true crime may have heard of this case. Mm-hmm. It's pretty well known, and it's been covered by podcasts like Trace Evidence and Crime Junkie. This case was also featured on America's Most Wanted 5 or 6 times.
Wow.
Jeez. This case is similar to the John List case, another family annihilator. And America's Most Wanted was actually able to get that case solved after List was on the run for almost 18 years. Yeah. So I think America's Most Wanted, John Walsh in particular, were really hoping they could solve the Bishop case as well. The case was also featured on television shows such as NBC's Unsolved Mysteries, ABC's Vanished, and John Walsh's The Hunt. And guess where else it was featured? I could not believe this.
What?
Our favorite German crime fighting show, Akten Zeichen XY Ugelist.
Oh my God. Wow,
Right?
crossover.
I love it. I
That's
was like, I
funny.
literally like yelped when I read it. I was like, ah! Oh my God. I was so excited.
Funny. Oh my God.
Which I learned translates to case number XY unsolved.
There we go.
How fun is that? I also found out that America's Most Wanted is actually based on Aktenzeichen XY Ungelöst, because I didn't register it at the time, but that show's been around since 1967, and it was adapted into America's Most Wanted for the U.S.
Oh,
That's
oh my God.
A little fun fact.
Okay.
For those of you who are like, why are they saying this? If you don't listen to our listener short stacks, but we have a German listener who brought up that show to us in a listener short stack, and we were struggling with saying the name, and now Alison is doing quite well. It's very impressive.
Although they definitely don't say XY.
Well, so they do say Y, and then the way they say X is like kiss.
Huh.
But if and Y doesn't sound like Y normally, but if they're using it in American terms, it sounds like Y. Otherwise, it sounds like the umlaut, the U with the umlaut. Because I looked that up too. I was like, how wrong am I saying this?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's our listener Lara who sent
Laura,
Yeah.
so cool. Yeah. So
Full
I was so excited, and now I'm going to get some merch from that show.
That's so
Yes, we
cool
need it.
because if we hadn't read that email and you had then done this case, we would have been like, what's this German
I wouldn't have
show?
even included it. I would have been like, who cares about a German crime fighting show, you know?
Yeah. All that to say, this case is well known. I definitely have heard it on a podcast. I don't remember which one, but
yeah, I mean, it's everywhere. You know, it's been covered a lot, and it's really cool that the German show covered it because he was probably living internationally.
Yeah,
most likely in the Eastern Bloc. It's theorized. So sadly, this case has never been solved. Bishop has never been located, dead or alive. There are pages and pages and pages of websites and blogs dedicated to this case. Sitcoms Online has no less than 64 pages of comments, speculation, and information.
Oh my gosh.
My information moving forward comes from about a dozen articles and a book called The Killer in the Family by Peter Ross Range, and of course our friends over at the Sitcoms Online message board. I found an article that gave me a little bit more background on the Bishop family that I'm going to read to you guys. So the romance of Annette Weiss and Brad Bishop began in California. Annette was born in Toledo, Ohio on April 14th, 1938. Her parents, Gilbert and Eunice Weiss, moved to California when she and her brother, Robert, were children. The family settled in the Los Angeles suburb of San Marino, and Annette attended school at nearby South Pasadena High School. It was there she met Brad Bishop, the son of Lobelia Amaryllis and William Bradford Bishop, an independent geologist, and Brad was born on August 1st, 1936. Brad graduated from high school in 1954, the year before Annette was to graduate, and he went east to study economics at Yale. At Yale, Bishop was remembered as an above-average student. He played freshman football, talked about being a doctor, and was described as very gregarious. Bishop would have graduated with the class of 1958 at Yale, but he dropped out just before the start of his senior year. One friend thought it had something to do with a shortage of money at home, as Brad's father was constantly complaining about how the big oil companies were rough on a private geologist. I mean, who among us, right? Brad ended up taking a job digging ditches. When he returned in 1959, he had given up his original plans to become a physician. Shortly after he graduated from Yale, Brad and Annette were married in San Clemente, where her family had moved. And Brad enlisted in the Army on August 7th, 1959 at Fort Dix, New Jersey. After basic training at Fort Benning, he enrolled in a student battalion of the Army's intelligence school at Fort Holabird in Baltimore. Bishop finished intelligence school in the summer of 1960 and immediately was sent to the Army's language school in Monterey, California, where he learned the Serbo-Croatian language. While the Bishops were living in Monterey, their first son, William Bradford Bishop III, was born on August 14th, 1961. Just 10 days after his son was born, Bishop was assigned to the 163rd Military Intelligence Battalion in Europe, where his wife and young son soon joined him. So for the next 2 years, Bishop served in Europe, primarily in Italy, where he carried out mundane spying efforts, such as listening to Yugoslavian radio broadcasts and translating Serbo-Croatian publications into English. He later joked to a friend that his, quote, big spy job called for him to infiltrate a Yugoslavian ski team that was appearing in Verona. And that's actually totally true. Bishop was an accomplished skier, so they sent him to infiltrate this Yugoslavian ski team that was racing in Verona, Italy at the time.
Wow. I mean, what a interesting life. And all of it builds a case for him to be doing what we think he's doing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when his 4-year enlistment ended in August of 1963, Staff Sergeant Bishop accepted his honorable discharge in Verona. The only medal he showed for 4 years of military service was for good conduct. The Bishop stayed on in Italy, and Bishop enrolled at the Florence campus of Middlebury College, which is based in Vermont, where he studied Italian. The family returned to the United States in the spring of 1964, and Bishop obtained a master's degree in Italian at the main Middlebury campus in Vermont. In the fall of 1965, Brad came to Washington, and armed with a master's degree and fluency in 2 foreign languages, he entered the State Department's Foreign Service Program. At age 29, Bishop was the oldest member of the group of 30 candidates who attended an 8-week orientation course and then a 20-week program of study at the Foreign Service Institute's old headquarters. Because of his age and language ability, Brad entered at the highest level for new Foreign Service officers. One classmate recalled that by November, Bishop had been promoted to Foreign Service Officer Grade 7. Quote, Brad was clearly one of the brightest guys in the class, said another classmate. Shortly before Christmas in 1965, Brad got his first overseas assignment as a junior officer in the U.S. Embassy at Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. The Bishops quickly became an integral part of the small American community there. Edward Corey, who was the U.S. ambassador at the time, rated Bishop as a, quote, first-class Foreign Service officer whom I pushed along as fast as I could. Annette Bishop was, according to Ambassador Corey, among the liveliest of the American mission wives. Bishop was named a consular officer in Addis Ababa in January 1967 and promoted to Field Security Operations 6 in June. In January of 1968, he was transferred to Milan, where his fluency in Italian helped him advance his career. So his next promotion to FSO 5 came in Italy in May 1969. So essentially, because of his age and his ability and his ambition, he's getting promoted really, really quickly when he first gets brought on. So the Bishops were rotated back to the United States in 1970, as is customary in the Foreign Service. So you don't stay abroad forever. You basically stay abroad, do your job, and then you come back and you start working in the United States. Bishop was sent back to school again, this time to UCLA. He attended UCLA for 3 quarters and graduated in mid-1971 with a second master's degree in African Studies. The Bishops lived in their hometown of South Pasadena that year, so Annette and the boys were able to spend considerable time with her parents, and on February 12th, 1971, their third and last son, Jeffrey Corder Bishop, was born. Bishop returned to Washington and the State Department in June of 1971 and was assigned to the East African Office of the Bureau of African Affairs. Leave it to the government. Everything has the longest title ever.
Yeah.
When the Bishops moved back to Washington that summer, they were accompanied by Bishop's mother, who, following the death of her husband, had sold the house in Pasadena. So when Brad was posted for his next foreign assignment to Gaborone, Botswana in January 1972, it was a family of 6. Brad, his wife, his mother, and his 3 sons who made the trip, so they all went. In Botswana, Bishop was deputy chief of the mission, a position that made him second only to the ambassador. He had been promoted to the rank FSO 4 after earning his second master's degree. And one of his classmates who kept close tabs on such matters noted that Brad was the first one out of the class to make it to grade 4. Persons who either knew the Bishops in both Ethiopia and Botswana, or had friends who did, noticed a slight change in the family on the second trip to Africa. Quote, Annette wasn't so anxious to play the loyal State Department wife bit, said one. She didn't always jump in and volunteer to bake cookies or help with the constant dinner parties. The change might have been attributed to the presence of Bishop's mother, an active, youngish-looking woman who was anxious to take her share of the responsibilities in the family. Lobila took over part of the household chores, particularly playing with baby Jeff. The relief permitted Annette to do her own thing, according to one friend, and increasingly she turned to her long-held interest in art. So I think she went back to school for fine art. The Bishops returned to Washington in 1974 and settled into the modern frame house in Bethesda, Maryland. They lived in a neighborhood of upwardly mobile families, including several other State Department Foreign Service officers, and the Bishops fit in beautifully by all accounts. They joined the tennis club and the swim club. The older boys swam competitively. Brad and Annette played tennis. William Bradford Bishop III played tennis. They were really well liked. So, to no one's surprise, by 1976, the family was having some issues. Bishop had consulted 3 psychiatrists and had been taking the prescription drug Serax to treat symptoms of depression and insomnia. A quantity of Serax was found in the glove compartment of the station wagon when it was discovered. Along with the Serax, authorities also found bloody clothes, a gun, personal hygiene items, a credit card receipt for the purchase of some tennis shoes earlier that month in Jacksonville, North Carolina, some dog treats, and evidence that a dog had been present. The Bishops had a golden retriever named Leo that Bradford Bishop was very fond of.
More fond of the dog than his own family?
Yeah.
Yes, I noted that in the reenactment that he was bringing the dog, and I was like, really? Really?
Yeah.
You spared the dog. Okay.
Yeah. Investigators say he may have killed his family, but it appears he kept Leo alive. Incidentally, I looked up the side effects of Serax, which is a benzo, and it had the usual side effects. So dizziness, tiredness. There was no mention of homicidal ideation or suicidal tendencies. So in this instance, we can't blame the meds. Mm-hmm. Besides Bishop's depression, there may have been some other stuff going on with the family. Annette was also seeking help. She reportedly told her doctor that she would sometimes feel lost in her car and that her, quote, thinking becomes fragmented, if not shattered, until she can stop by the roadside for 10 or 15 minutes.
Wow.
Uh-oh.
Mm-hmm. The doctor recommended a tranquilizer and possible psychiatric assistance. Annette was tired of the diplomatic globetrot. After multiple short hauls in Italy, California, Maryland, Ethiopia, Vermont, and Botswana, and after uprooting every 2 or 3 years for nearly 2 decades, she wanted permanence. She wanted to stay in Carderock Springs to keep the kids in local schools and to find her own role beyond that of being a foreign services wife. There were other problems straining the Bishop marriage. One was money. Since moving back to always money.
Aside.
Yeah, I read an article. The UK did a study on family annihilators, and apparently there was some evidence that the longer the man was unemployed, the greater the percentage of the family being murdered. Like there was a correlation there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, money has a lot to do with it. So since moving back to Washington 2 years earlier, they lost, the free house. They lost their servants. They lost the overseas pay in Botswana. Obviously, the cost of living was probably nothing there. Brad and Annette were having trouble in 1976 making ends meet on his almost $26,000 a year annual salary. Without Lobila's intervention, they would not even been able to buy their small Carderock house. And now Lobila, too, was running out of money because she was left an inheritance by her late husband, but that was drying up. So just 2 months before, the Bishops had missed their mortgage payment. And one neighbor in Carderock Springs said that Lobila had even tried to sell her fur-trimmed coat that she wore. Lobila said she paid $3,000 for the coat at Saks Fifth Avenue in Bethesda and now just wanted $800 for it. So I think they were really cash-strapped.
Yeah.
Money wasn't the only issue. There were marital troubles of another kind. Only recently, Brad had been having an affair with another woman. It was not the first time that he had strayed. Many years before, investigators learned that he had done the same thing. Between these 2 sexual excursions, there may have well been others, said the police officers. On a credit card application, Brad once listed Annette's occupation as chief slave.
Oh. Okay. My God.
Mm-hmm. So there are many theories out there about Brad Bishop, and what happened to him. Many people draw comparisons between him and John List, who I mentioned earlier. On November 9th, 1971, List killed his wife, mother, and 3 children at their home in Westfield, New Jersey, and then disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
He had planned the murders so meticulously that nearly a month passed before anyone suspected anything was amiss. More recently, I think we all thought of the Xavier Dupont de Ligonier murders and disappearance.
Yep.
Some people theorize that Brad Bishop burned the bodies of his family so that they could be found and then took his own life in another location. The commenters who believe this consistently point to the fact that family annihilators tend to take their own lives after killing their families. But I found an article from Wired UK that said that 81% of male family annihilators attempt to take their own lives. That's just attempt. And I don't know if the stats are the same in the US, but 19% is still a pretty large percentage.
Yeah.
So I don't think we can say that he took his own life for certain.
Well, and I feel I would be interested in the 80% that do try. Are they doing it right there at the scene?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it
Generally,
seems,
they do.
yeah. So it
Generally,
seems more
they do.
like he wanted to get away and not.
I agree.
die.
Yeah.
I agree.
And it's just so many other things, like the sighting in Italy, and Italian being one of his prime languages. Like,
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just too easy for him to disappear.
he
He's
could
got
go a number.
he has
of
the
places.
ability.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he's used to doing that too.
Yeah. I found a article about family annihilators written by people at the University of Pennsylvania. Bishop was the civil reputable killer, and that is motivated by a perverse form of altruism. Quote, his entire identity is in the family, said Richard Gellis, dean of the School of Social Policy and Practice at the University of Pennsylvania and an authority on domestic violence. The father is almost always considering suicide as the only escape from some sort of financial crisis. Murdering his family members, then, becomes a way of rescuing them from the hardship and shame of bankruptcy and suicide.
Yep.
Disgusting.
Yeah.
Wasn't that
And
the
then
case with List as well? I can't remember.
It was, List was religion based. He felt his family had begun to sin. They were all sinners and they needed to be killed. And then Xavier Dupont Ligonier, whatever his name is, he was broke.
Yeah.
So that was financially motivated.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the one there is one familicide where they lived in this big beautiful house, and then but the dad thought they had no money and they didn't have any money, and the room they were all killed in had this chandelier in it that was worth tons of money.
That's the list.
Yeah, that's List.
That was the list.
Because I think it's partly money too.
Yeah, I think it was. That they were also like laid out in the same room. There was like a lot of ritual behind it.
Yeah.
Right.
But the reason he gave was that they were all immersed in sin. He had like a teenage daughter and he thought she was sinful. And yeah. Let's see.
Like, killing your whole family and then killing yourself is obviously selfish, but like killing your whole family and then going to live in Italy or whatever is
next level.
Yeah.
Evil.
Next level. Additionally, authorities had ruled out Bishop going deep into the forest and taking his own life. During the investigation, bloodhounds had been brought in. The dogs followed Bishop's trail about a mile into the forest where it stopped. It did not branch off into the woods. It just stopped. So the theory was that Bishop had walked that far, then turned around, gone back to the parking lot where the dogs followed his trail. It stopped at sort of a bulletin board, which had maps of the park and trails and rules and stuff. You know, like when you go to a state park, that bulletin board.
Yeah.
Then his trail went to the middle of the parking lot, which was empty at that time of year, and gone.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that indicates that someone picked up Bishop in a vehicle.
Wow.
So this type of family annihilator, the civil reputable family annihilator, is not committing murder as a crime of passion.
No.
Usually they've been thinking about it for a while. And then, like we said, a trigger event sets it off. So on March 31st, 1993, investigators for the Montgomery County Sheriff's Department announced that they uncovered an overlooked letter addressed to Bishop that was a very valuable piece of evidence. This letter implied, but did not directly state, that Bishop might have been interested in hiring a professional killer, with the implication that the killer would be to kill his family. The theory, along with the possibility that Bishop had long-standing plans to dispose of the bodies in North Carolina, stems from the letter written by an imprisoned bank robber to Bishop just before the slayings. Montgomery Sheriff Raymond M. Knight, who we're going to hear about now throughout the rest of this, said that if the letters had been found in a timely fashion, it may very well have affected the Bishop investigation if police had been able to interview the man who wrote it. But the man died in 1983.
Oh, God.
The letter was found in September of 1992 in Bishop's files at the State Department by Sheriff Sergeant Thomas L. Kiefer, retired Montgomery County Homicide Detective John E. Cady.
Wow.
So when Bishop disappeared, I think it took the State Department a couple months to officially fire him. And for some reason, no one collected his information from his office. So it all just went into a file folder. And then it wasn't until there was a renewed interest from this guy, Kiefer, and this other guy, Cady, that they reopened the case and pulled this information from the State Department and found this letter.
Oh, my God.
So I know, it's bananas. So, and this guy was in prison. They could have just went to the prison and interviewed him.
Yeah.
So the uncovered registered letter was written by a bank robber, Ken Bankston, who was at that time an inmate at the Federal Penitentiary in Marion, Illinois. It was postmarked March 15th, 1976, and would have arrived at Bishop's office just a few days later, according to sheriff's investigators. So it was written like the day or 2 days before Bishop killed his family. Apparently, the letter was opened by a secretary and then placed in Bishop's files, which were then packed away. The letter makes no direct specific mention of any murder plot, but investigators believe that it offers new insights into possible preparations for the crime that Bishop might have engaged in. So the investigators weren't able to find any other record of other correspondence between Bishop and Bankson, but the number 6 was placed on the top of the letter by Bankson, and the text mentions letters 4 and 5. So there was apparently a series of letters between these two men.
Wow.
In one portion of the discovered letter, Bankson wrote, quote, "Now in answer to your question, I am most sure that she is in a North Carolina state penitentiary. Although the she is not identified, investigators recalled that a witness in Jacksonville, North Carolina, had reported seeing Bishop with a female companion the day after the murders, and that Bishop had used his credit card in a sporting goods store to buy the sneakers." That was the last confirmed sighting. While he was buying the sneakers, the woman, about his age, waited outside with an Irish setter on a leash. Bishop's dog was never found or recovered, and he was a golden retriever, so it would have been easy to think that he was an Irish setter. And remember how the bloodhounds just stopped in the middle of the parking lot? It's entirely possible that this woman picked him up. Bankston also informed Bishop that, quote, "You could walk from Phelps Lake to Croswell. I think it's about 5 miles. So after checking atlases and making calls to several states, officers Kiefer and Cady determined that Phelps Lake and Cresswell are in North Carolina, just a few miles from where the bodies were found. So they were talking about like good places to dump bodies.
Jeez.
God.
Sheriff Sergeant Thomas L. Kiefer and retired Montgomery County Homicide Detective Johnny Cady put in long hours, helped by the FBI, trying to track down people mentioned or referred to in the letter. After months of work, they managed to locate a man mentioned in the letter only as, quote, Sonny. He told them that he believed that Bishop had offered a passport to Bankston in return for information on how to hire a killer. The investigators say they got conflicting answers from the State Department about whether Bishop could have been able to procure passports for himself and others. Bankston died of cancer in 1983 in Mississippi after gaining an early release from prison for medical reasons. Another convict mentioned in the letter, David Allen Paul, told a reporter from the Washington Post in a telephone interview that Bishop wanted, quote, a shooter, that he was willing to spend good money to kill his family. Yeah. He further stated that Bishop, quote, hired a couple of men to do the job, but they took off on him. So that could explain why the murders were committed in the fashion that they were. because Bishop could have just become frustrated and impatient and decided to kill his own family.
Yeah.
So there are people out there who wonder if Bishop wasn't set up. You know, it's the internet, and there's one thing that the internet just trusts, it's the government. There are theories that Bishop worked for the CIA, and that his family was murdered either by international enemies or by the CIA itself. I'm not going to get into all of it, but in the book A Killer in the Family by Peter Ross Range, there is evidence that he may have been involved in spycraft, like we said earlier. And there's some like vague references to, quote, outstanding achievement, him being on missions of a particularly dangerous and sensitive nature. But I don't know. You know, it's all like redacted governmental documentation. So
Yeah.
it's difficult. I don't live in a world where the CIA is actively engaged in the life of the people that I know. So I really don't know what their reach is and how. I don't know why they would involve themselves in Bishop's life. I certainly don't know why they would kill his whole family and let him escape the country. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
That doesn't make...
No, I can't think of one reason.
Yeah. We've had the CIA behaving badly in Ray Hickenbotham, stuff like that. Like we're going to get some more another MK Ultra segment eventually. But to think that they would murder an entire family, dump them in the woods and set fire to them, just like does not compute.
And that's the thing. The scene is sloppy. Like unless they were trying to make it look like it was him.
Yeah.
The scene is sloppy. Yeah. And that doesn't seem like the CIA did it.
I mean, Sheriff Knight really believes that the CIA did this, that he believes that Bishop killed his family and that the CIA helped him escape. He claims that the FBI is also involved in hiding Bishop. It just seems too big to me.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of these people cannot, it's almost easier to believe that the CIA did it than to believe that a man decided to kill his entire family.
Yeah. And run.
Yeah.
Not only kill them, but like, it's weird to me that he was maybe going to hire a professional, because then his son was so brutally beaten.
Well, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was violent. He was very violent. Very violent.
Yeah.
Well,
like
and that's
the
why
method of doing it is strange. And
well, it doesn't have to be like they're not mutually exclusive, right? So you can be planning this murder and then have a trigger event and lose your shit and then kill your family. You can do all of those things. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a crime of passion where he lost it. It could have been something that he was planning. He wasn't going to do himself. He didn't get this promotion and he flew off the handle.
Yeah, which is
horrifying. Because there is certainly evidence of overkill, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, and I was going to say it's just such a jump to go from hiring an assassin to doing it in such a like personal and brutal way.
Exactly.
Yeah. And people are very hung up on the fact that Bishop moved the bodies and set them on fire because that he had to have known that was going to get attention, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But then there's the other argument that if he knew that he was leaving, like if he knew that he had an out no matter what, he would have just done whatever the hell he wanted to do. Like he wouldn't have been worried about getting caught because he would have known that he wasn't going to get caught.
Yeah.
So I don't know. And then the speculation that Bishop had help in his murder or his escape was bolstered as recently as 2013 by an informant from a Virginia motorcycle gang who talked to investigators. So this longtime reliable source living under the Federal Witness Protection Program claimed he knew a woman who worked at the State Department and was also associated with the motorcycle gang. He claims she was having an affair with Brad Bishop, but was also involved with a gang member who had hid in North Carolina to escape federal surveillance for other crimes. The woman, said the source, had helped Brad flee after the murders. In this telling, Brad had later been brought back from North Carolina by two other gang members, and then for a while was, quote, hiding in plain sight in the woman's apartment in Falls Church, Virginia, a Washington suburb. In the end, the motorcycle gang members helped Brad leave the country with false documents, said the informant. The motorcycle gang's source, said the investigators, was nearly impeachable, quote, fully reliable, credible. In the language of the investigators' report, investigators claim that the informant has always been right in the past. It's very likely that Bishop did escape and was given some assistance getting out of the country, even if it was just a ride from where he dumped his car. Right. His numerous connections internationally, he easily could have disappeared in a pre-9/11 world. Some people suggest that he defected, not to the USSR, but to Yugoslavia, because there were some Eastern Bloc countries at the time that had much better living conditions than others during the Cold War. And the Socialist Republic of Yugoslavia had a more liberal brand of socialism than the USSR. So they think that he might have gone there because it wasn't as difficult to survive as it was like in the USSR. And then they think that he basically fled and then worked as a day laborer, but some say like he could have fled and defected and gone to work for these other governments because he had enough information.
Yeah. And then he'd have even more protection.
Exactly. So there have been sightings over the last 45 years in Stockholm, Sweden, Sorrento, Italy, Basel, Switzerland, Hong Kong, Tokyo, and throughout the United States, just to name a few. Wow. March 12th, 1976, Bishop was alleged to have tried to swap handguns. So this is after he has murdered his family before the bodies are discovered. The gun shop owner had told the SBI a man matching Bishop's description tried to swap a loaded .38 caliber pistol for a more powerful Magnum pistol. The man showed what the owner said were State Department credentials, but was refused business when he waved a loaded gun in the store. The SBI discounted the theory that Bishop may have been in the store because the bloodhounds did nothing to respond to Bishop's scent in the store. Then, on March 17th, 1976, a news report stated that Bishop had been seen in Wilmington, North Carolina. On March 9th, a week after the bodies were discovered, a man driving a maroon Chevrolet station wagon with Maryland tags bought gasoline in a New Hanover County gas station. And on the 11th, a man matching Bishop's description was seen the same day in a tavern in Wilmington. Speculation ran high that he may have stowed away on one of the 13 vessels leaving Wilmington from March 2nd to March 10th, 5 of them bound for foreign ports. So I guess that was a shipping area that he was seen in. In July 1978, a Swedish woman who said she had collaborated with Bishop while on a business trip in Ethiopia reported that she had spotted him twice in a public park in Stockholm during the span of 1 week. She stated she was, quote, absolutely certain that the man was Bishop. She did not contact the police at the time because she had not yet realized that he was wanted for murder in the U.S.
You know, I was going to say, because we commented about Xavier DuPont being very generic. This guy isn't really. I find him to be pretty recognizable.
Like he looks like Quentin Tarantino.
Yes. He has an interesting face, so he is like easier to spot.
I agree. So then there's the January 1979 sighting by Roy Harrell that we, of course, see in the segment.
That we were fortunate enough to witness.
The internet can't agree whether Roy Harrell actually saw Bishop in Italy. Some say that he's a bit of an attention seeker. Others say he would know Bishop, having worked so closely with him for years.
Yeah.
Back in 2012, a Sitcoms Online user with the handle JoeDoe86 said, Roy Harrell lives in Texas. He's retired. And I talked to him about a year ago, and he told me that in the early 90s, a detective was working the Bishop case, and Roy offered to have coffee with him and discuss what he knew of Bishop. The detective refused, and Roy just went on with his business. To Roy, the whole case was handled pretty sloppily by law enforcement. Basically, Roy has said that there were severe money problems in the household and that Brad Bishop felt that he had failed as a father to provide the best for his family. He also said that Bishop loved Italy and that he was positive, capitals, that it was Bishop in Sorrento. But again, the police never fully investigated the sighting. According to Roy, he thinks that Bishop is still living somewhere around Naples, Italy. So some say that the chances of Harrell being one of the last people to see Bishop alive and also the one to spot him in Naples is statistically improbable. Other people who are international expats say they run into the same fellow expats frequently when traveling abroad, and that the communities are really small. So it isn't crazy that he could have run into him. Both men had worked for the same place and were probably sent on trips to the same area, so it makes it more likely that they would go back to those areas that they were familiar with.
Yep.
Right.
While I was researching this, I researched this for days.
I'm sure.
While this was happening, I really didn't know what to believe for the longest time about Harold, and then I read The Book Killer in the Family. And the author Peter Ross Range shed some light on Harold's story. So I'm just going to read you what he said in the book.
Okay.
January 1979, a former State Department employee said he had seen Brad bearded and disheveled in a public restroom in Sorrento, Italy. "You're Brad Bishop," he exclaimed. The bearded man replied, "Oh, no," and then fled out into a blinding rain, said the tipster. The Sorrento sighting was considered credible and went into the Brad Bishop lore for more than a decade. But when investigators interviewed the tipster again in the 1990s, they found him providing so many details about his relationship with Brad and other people close to him that they began to doubt his credibility. Quote, "He seemed to like the attention we were giving him and talking a little too much," said one investigator. So, to test his veracity, the cops asked the tipster if they knew anything about Brad's connection to a certain person of interest. But the person of interest didn't really exist. The investigators had just made him up to test their source.
Oh.
They gave their fictional character a random last name based whimsically on the cop's father-in-law's name. Quote, "Let me think about that and check my notes," said the ex-State Department official who claimed to know Brad so well. The next day, the tipster came back and said he'd found his notes. He then produced an elaborate story about the non-existent person and his relationship with Brad. To the cops, that fanciful tale totally discredited his supposed restroom sighting in Sorrento, and his claims have been dismissed ever since.
So it probably was just some poor, Italian street urchin who,
If that even happened.
If it even happened. Yeah. So I don't think that people know about this unless they've read Ross's book. So to this day, people are still debating whether or not Harold is reliable, but the reality is that law enforcement deemed him not credible, and that's it as far as I'm concerned. They tracked him and he lied.
Yeah, that's God damn it.
Also on September 19th, 1994, on a Basel train platform, a neighbor who had known Bishop and his family in Bethesda was on vacation and reported that she had seen Bishop from a few feet away. The neighbor described Bishop as, quote, well-groomed and said that he was getting into a car. Robert Weiss, Bishop's brother-in-law, said without a legal declaration of Bishop's death, the family's estate was settled 9 years after Bishop's disappearance. The bulk of it went to Annette's parents and a cousin of Bishop's who lives in France, which I thought was really interesting. Of all the supposed sightings, the FBI only considered 2 as valid initially, the one in Stockholm, Sweden, and the one in Sorrento, Italy, until that was debunked. According to the America's Most Wanted website, in 2010, authorities believed Bishop was living in Switzerland, Italy, or elsewhere in Europe, or possibly in California. They have no idea where he is. And he may have worked as a teacher or become involved in criminal activities.
Oh, okay. We're just running the full range here.
Yeah. He's at the bottom of the ocean. He's oh God,
I do not
he lives in
know.
a cave. He's with Osama bin Laden. Okay. In 2011, WUSA aired a story that there were reports that Bishop had died in Hong Kong and then in France, but police used fingerprints to confirm that those reports were false. In 2014, authorities stated Bishop was probably living in plain sight in the United States and avoiding discovery by avoiding arrest. Being arrested would enable law enforcement to run his fingerprints and catch him. Mm-hmm. That same year, at the request of the FBI, forensic artist Karen Taylor created an age progression sculpture to suggest Bishop's projected appearance at about age 77.
Ooh, a sculpture.
Yeah, I have pictures of it. Interestingly, Karen Taylor was commissioned by America's Most Wanted to do an age progression sculpture of John List.
Oh, wow.
And her sculpture was what eventually got List apprehended when an old neighbor recognized him.
I was just thinking there was another case we talked about that had a sculpture.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
She did it.
Oh my
She did it. So they got her to do the other one because
Wow.
she did such an amazing job.
Good at it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So also in early April of 2014, WRC-TV in Washington, D.C. launched a webpage to display multiple investigative reports and extensive information on the Bishop case. This included samples of Bishop's handwriting, fingerprints, dental records, and previously unseen Bishop family videos. In 2018, the FBI removed William Bradford Bishop Jr. from its 10 most wanted list. William Bradford Bishop Jr. was only the 10th person removed from the 10 most wanted list since 1950 without prosecutors dropping charges or the fugitive being captured or dying.
Wow.
Despite removing him from the list, the FBI said it would continue to hunt for Mr. Bishop. Mr. Bishop, who was added to the list just as recently as 2014. So he wasn't added until 2014.
What?
And that was because there was a lot of attention being given back to the case. And suddenly the FBI realized that this guy had been on the run for so long. And basically they were like, oh, this is embarrassing. Like, we need to catch this guy.
Oh my God.
So they put him on the list in 2014. And the case got a lot of attention because of it, because it's a big deal. But since nothing had come up by 2018, they were like, we're not going to find him. The Federal Bureau of Investigation said in a statement that it was replacing Mr. Bishop, who would be 81 years old, because it no longer believed publicity would aid in his capture. Mr. Bishop's surprise addition to the list in April of 2014 drew heavy publicity that nevertheless failed to help authorities find him. The FBI also said it did not believe that Mr. Bishop was any longer a danger to the public. It would be more helpful, the FBI said, to give his spot to a, quote, dangerous fugitive in the hopes that publicity might aid in his capture.
I mean, that's true. He's running and hiding. He's not out there murdering.
Exactly. If he is alive, William Bradford Bishop would be turning 85 years old in August.
Oh! Oh!
Oh, I know it, girl. I know it. I lived it, honey. I know it. The Montgomery County Sheriff's Department encourages anyone with any information on this case to contact them at 240-777-7000.
Wow.
And that is it. That is the case of William Bradford Bishop Jr.
Oh,
Jesus.
Annihilator.
Honey.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh my God. I'm sorry.
Me that case.
Yeah, it's not that often that we even come across a case that I've heard of before, you know, other than like major heavy hitters. That is
Totally.
such an
And
epic
I
saga.
think we actually have another family annihilator that's pretty well known that's going to come up in like the next few seasons too.
Oh my God.
Another 3 named family annihilator who I think was covered by MFM maybe and some other podcasts too.
Okay.
So,
Well, good job.
all right.
Oh my God.
It's a wrap on Brad Bishop Jr.
Good job.
Thanks. Thank you for sticking with us through that.
Can you believe that now I have to do a treasure?
That's how it always goes. With the
I'm
treasure.
embarrassed.
Selfishly, I am excited because now I just get to giggle and relax. And,
Yeah, you're right. The stakes are low here. We don't need to.
Yeah.
Everybody can chill because this is a dumb treasure.
I can't believe this is your first one with your like classic Karlin snark and treasure. I feel like they're going to be a great combination.
Yeah, because Eliza was getting them for a while. She's probably had her
I've
fill.
only done one. Yeah, Eliza's done a couple.
So this is the Lost Adams Diggings. On fandom, they call it Adams Treasure. So it goes by both, but mostly it's called the Lost Adams Diggings. And Outdoor Stack intros the segment in classic Outdoor Stack attire. He's got his plaid button up. He's got a turtleneck underneath. He's got a little brown coat over top of that.
He's ready to dig for some treasure.
He is. And he says that as long as a man believes there's a treasure to be found, he'll be spurred on by the belief that he'll be the one to find it. And I said, you're telling us, Mr. Stack.
Yeah, man.
So the story takes place in the Arizona Territory, September 1864. Troopers from Fort Apache find 2 prospectors wandering in the desert. By the time they reach the fort, the men are barely alive. One of the prospectors, known as Adams, tells the army surgeon a remarkable tale. So always it's like the deathbed story.
The deathbed confession of the treasure.
Oh my God. He tells him that there's, quote, mountains of gold out there. There's a river of gold up there. In the reenactment, he says, there's gold up there the size of acorns. He says that a couple of weeks ago, him and his men were looking for the gold up Zigzag Canyon, which was supposed to be full of gold. Stack says that Adams and his band of 20 miners were led by a Mexican guide nicknamed Gotchier. And on my subtitles, it was Gotchere. So that's how I wrote it down going forward. But I read in my research that he actually had a twisted ear. So I think he had like a deformed ear, and it was Gotch ear, EAR.
Oh no.
Yeah. So cool nickname, guys.
Oh.
So Gotchier had promised to take Adams to the gold in return for 2 horses, a saddle, 2 $50 gold pieces, and a red silk bandana.
Dream.
I was like,
Gotta look good.
well, and 2 horses, just 1 saddle. He's not asking a lot. Like, he doesn't need much. Gotchier.
He already had a saddle. He just had no horse.
Maybe. So Stack tells us that Gotchier even said that the miners could shoot him if he didn't find the gold.
Ooh.
They eventually came to what appeared to be a dead end, but Gotchier led the party through a, quote, hidden portal into the narrow Zigzag Canyon. Tom Collenborn, author and historian, says he thinks Gotchier played the main role in getting them to the site because he'd been raised by the Apaches, so he knew the area and he knew that, quote, gold was important to the white man.
Wow. Again, no truer words have ever
I was like, Tom, we've been saying this for years. Nobody cares more about a treasure than a white guy. Nobody. Inside the canyon was a stream fed by a 20-foot waterfall, and the stream was brimming with gold. Cue reenactment of each miner slowly entering the little space going, gold! Gold!
And that's honestly not the first time we've seen almost that exact same thing.
Yeah, totally. It's definitely happened before. Tom continues to explain the gold was visible on the ground, and gold is heavy, so you must think about how much gold is there if some was visible on the ground.
Okay.
Okay.
Every flash flood that brought water over that waterfall brought more gold from above.
Ooh.
Stack says that the men decided to pool the gold and share it equally. And I was like, wow, that's so
Forward
fair
thinking.
and honest. Yeah.
And absolutely not what's going to happen.
And then
The one guy's like, yes, stupids, put that gold together.
I'll watch over it while we're collecting.
Yeah, I'll watch it, guys. Yeah. You go. It's cool. I got it.
So they set up camp to begin prospecting. But several days later, unexpected visitors arrived. A local Apache chieftain named Nana and 20 of his warriors. Tom explains to us that mountains were sacred to the Apache, and the Zigzag Canyon was probably sacred to them because it was part of the mountain. Tom goes on to say that the Apache believed that gold was the tears of the sun, and nobody touched the tears of the sun because the sun was the almighty thing to most Indian cultures, the source of all light. So he's like simultaneously trying to like explain their culture. You don't really know what you're talking about, but okay.
Yeah, I think it was nice that he tried to explain why Native American people wouldn't care, like wouldn't touch gold. I feel like he feels like he worked hard to educate himself.
Yes.
That's kind of what his attitude was.
Yes. So then we have a reenactment of Adam sitting next to a fire with Chieftain Nana, and he gives Nana his rifle as a gift. So it's kind of like this symbolic thing of blah, blah, blah. Tom Collenborn says that Nana had set some rules, and one was that they do not go above the waterfall. Quote, probably because there was more gold up there and it would attract more white men to the area. He hoped they would fill their pokes and leave and not come back. Adams had made a deal with Nana that if any of his men were caught above the waterfall, they would die at the hands of the, quote, Indians.
Oof.
But one morning, a miner had chased down a stray horse, and you guessed it, he ended up going above the waterfall. He returned with a gold nugget, quote, the size of a hen egg.
This sounds like a Disney movie.
Truly, yes. Quote, ain't that the biggest nugget you ever seen? The prospector says in the reenactment. Adams says that it sure was. Where did he find it? When the man told him he'd gone above the falls, Adams got angry with him and said he told the chief they would not go up there. He yells at him that he's going to get them all killed. He tells him to take the nugget and get back to work, but the man says, no, you keep it. It's yours. Robert Stack says that the discovery, quote, fueled gold fever in the camp. Behind Adams' back, the other miners began taking gold from above and below the camp. So they were kind of like being a little sneaky about it. They would do both at the same time so that it wasn't like cleaning it out all at once.
Oh, right.
Some of it was stored in a coffee pot hidden beneath the flagstone of the camp fireplace. So Stack says that according to the legend, the miners amassed as much as 300 pounds of gold worth nearly $1.5 million. So I converted that into 2021 monies, and it would be $24,862,643.
Oh, we love
That
it.
is bananas. Like 300 pounds of gold buried in a coffee can?
I know.
True.
One morning, Adams and his partner Davidson were about a mile outside the camp when they heard gunfire. Stack says Chief Nana had been true to his word. Over a reenactment of like all the white guys laying dead and the Native Americans like moving their bodies around, sort of. So they're like looking down at this from above, according to the way Stack tells it. From a lookout above the camp, Adams and Davidson stared down helplessly. Like, I think there was nothing they could really do at that point.
Yeah.
Back to the reenactment of Adams laying in bed, telling his story. He says that they waited until the sun went down and then they headed out of the canyon. Quote, you don't believe any of this, do you? He says. Then, in what has now become a UM Treasure segment staple, our main protagonist, while lying ill in bed, pulls proof of his treasure out of nowhere and shows it to the person at his bedside. He literally seen it every time.
Okay.
Adams pulls out the hen egg-sized nug and shows it to the surgeon. Tom tells us that, like many treasure hunters before him, Adams spent the rest of his life searching for Zigzag Canyon. So not even searching for the treasure, he couldn't find the canyon.
Yeah, I thought that was a bad sign for future treasure hunters.
Yeah. He says he thinks that when a man sees that much gold in a place like Adams had, he couldn't give up that dream. There's no way. He knew it was there. He had to continue to search for it until he found it.
You couldn't give up that dream or write down directions to get back to it?
No. What the fuck?
It's just so stupid.
Oh, no, honey. But here comes Mr. Stack to keep us grounded in reality. Quote, Adams never did find his mother lode. Years later, he died drunk and penniless, and the story of the lost gold grew into legend.
Yeah, that was rough.
Stack then tells us that in the 1920s, a railroad man named John Mitchell began on an extensive search for the treasure, and his writings are the basis for today's ongoing quest for the lost Adams diggings. Ron Feldman is a camping guide who has studied Mitchell's account for years. Feldman says, if you pay attention to what John Mitchell says, he tells you basically where the lost Adams diggings is. Stack tells us that Feldman compared Mitchell's writings with modern-day maps and discovered that many rivers and landmarks had gone under different names in previous years. It's like, yeah, guys, You've been doing this for decades upon decades. Yes. He had determined that Adams Canyon lay on Eagle Creek near the town of Clifton, Arizona, 200 miles north of Tucson. In January 1990, Feldman and a geologist named Mick McPherson went to Eagle Creek to hopefully find the lost Adams fortune. Mick McPherson says that when they went there and discovered the little hidden portal, everyone calls it a portal.
Are we in space now? What is
Yeah.
I know.
Very, very futuristic.
It is. The little hidden portal that led into Zigzag Canyon, he immediately knew that this was the spot. He said it fit the stories, it had the right appearance, and it is an appropriate place where gold could have been concentrated in great quantities as a deposit. Stack says that everything about the canyon fit Adams' descriptions, and they even found a trickle among the canyon wall where a waterfall had once flowed. Mick explains that if there had been more water there, it would have been a beautiful cascading waterfall.
He's like, see that cliff? If you add water, it's a waterfall.
Anyway, Mick says, it's very hard to explain the feeling that rushed through me. It was very exciting. And of course, we both knew the legend of the coffee pot full of gold buried in the floor of the cabin. We soon discovered the ruins of the cabin and started digging in the floor. We found some relics, but no pot of full gold. In the reenactment, they pull a gold mining pan out of the ground. And they also found some tools for making horseshoes and a section of a railroad track.
None of which are treasure.
Mick McPherson tells us that in the early days, John D. Mitchell was a railroad man. He worked on railroads, and they thought of Mitchell when they found the items, and they thought of him when they didn't find the pot of gold.
Wait.
Because if you're a railroad man, yes! You know you bring chunks of railroad with you.
You got it.
Everywhere you go.
You never know when you'll need it.
You
gotta lay that track.
You gotta do it.
It's your job.
Stack asks, could John D. Mitchell have found the coffee pot of gold and perhaps written his history of the legend in a way to mislead others?
Ooh.
Ron Feldman and Mick McPherson are convinced they have unlocked the secret of the treasure's location, and the motherlode of gold is still waiting to be found. However, other fortune hunters feel that Feldman and McPherson are wrong, and the lost Adams diggings may actually be in another part of the state.
So
that's the end of this
ready
segment.
for Adams Diggings Part 2.
We have 45 minutes.
I love how, doesn't it just end there?
Yep, that's it.
Stack's like, or it could not be there.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Totally. So, okay, research time. First of all, nobody knows Adams' first name. We can tell you his exact birth date, but nobody knows his first name.
Weird. Interesting.
Adams was born in Rochester, New York, July 10th, 1829. In August 1864, he was journeying in his wagon from Los Angeles to Tucson. So this is where the story differs from what UM said. After Apaches set his wagon on fire, Adams drove a dozen saved horses towards Sacaton, Arizona, with the hopes to sell them. In Sacaton, Adams met a group of 21 miners led by John Brewer traveling together in search of the gold fields. The party also accounted the Pima Mexican guide who promised the prospectors to lead them to the Valley of Gold. So the story just starts totally differently. And there's this guy, John Brewer, involved, who's not mentioned at all in UM. So the miners made a bargain with the guide, who only asked for a horse, a saddle, a weapon, and some of the gold in exchange. The group was badly in need of horses, and when by fate Adams appeared in Sacaton with his 12 head, Brewer struck a deal with Adams on the terms that Adams would share leadership with him in exchange for donating his horses. So this other guy named Brewer was like very involved in this version of the story, but not in UM.
Weird.
Yeah.
So I don't know. In July 1949, 83-year-old Robert W. Bob Lewis, who said he had known Adams when he had been a cowpuncher and law officer in Socorro County, New Mexico, stated that he and Adams searched for the gold together in 1889, 25 years after the massacre in 1864. But it was not until 1918 that he claimed to have single-handedly found the skeletons and Adams' cabin at the mouth of a canyon 35 miles northwest of Magdalena, New Mexico. Lewis said that everything was there just as Adams had described except for the gold. He said he later found out the missing gold had been found by a Magdalena sheep herder who received $20,000 for it, with which he bought a ranch in Albuquerque, New Mexico. So
we know where the gold went?
Well, that's what one guy said, Bob Lewis. Other possible locations for the gold. The Zuni Mountains, thought the most likely location for decades. Between 1895 and 1930, several large logging communities flourished in the Zuni Mountains. Between logging, they would drink and prospect. Rumors of gold in the Zunis had become so common that the U.S. government ordered several geological expeditions in the years between World War I and World War II to verify whether this claim could be supported. The geologists found nothing. It was also around the mid-century that the popularity of the Adams legend began to diminish, and the Lost Dutchman mine became America's most sought-for gold mine.
Yeah.
So it was like the biggest, most well-known until that one. So Adams himself spent most of the remainder of his life searching the areas in and around Reserve, New Mexico. This area was the largest gold-producing area in the state and hosted several small mining booms. The Datilles and Galenas Mountains and the basins to the north of these mountains were considered possible locations for the diggings that increased in popularity as the other locations lost appeal. Dick French, in his book 4 Days from Fort Wingate, places the diggings in this area. It has become known as Dick French's area. A follow-up work by Dick French, Return to the Lost Adams Diggings, a Paul A. Hale story, published in 2014, uses historical, artifactual, geographical, and geological data to demonstrate the viability of the location in the book as the locality of the Lost Adams Diggings. A similar but geographically less plausible location was found in eastern Arizona by Don Fingato near Clifton. The site contains features described by Adams, much like the area favored by Dick French. However, the gold remained undiscovered.
I cannot believe that people are still talking about this. 2014?
Yes.
What?
In some mines, the gold was found to be on either Zuni or Navajo reservations, but the laws preventing the acquisition of mineral rights in these regions have discouraged searching. So a guy named J. Frank Dobie devoted half of his book, Apache Gold and Yaqui Silver, to the story of the Lost Adams diggings and considered it to be the greatest lost mine story of U.S. history. Blah, 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 blah. The 1963 novel McKenna's Gold by Heck Allen is loosely based on the Adams legend. The novel was made into a film in 1969 with the title McKenna's Gold. And there's a few books out there about this, including one from 2017, The Lost Canyon of Gold, The Discovery of the Legendary Lost Adams Diggings by W.C. Jameson.
You guys, there are so many problems. There are so many problems to solve in this world.
Yeah. So a lot of claims have been made over the years that people have found it. And a few names have been thrown around, but nobody ever says I found it, of course. And I don't know. But my husband was like, if you found a canyon full of gold, would you want everyone to know about it? And I was like,
No.
well, good point. So
Exactly.
maybe.
Well, that's why I could see if that railroad guy did find it. Like, why would he tell anybody? I wouldn't tell anybody.
No.
Yeah, but he was also like the main one talking about it to everybody in the world. So that seems odd if it was him, but I don't know, man.
I don't know, man.
Maybe you can find it, guys. Will you look? Will you take a look?
Yeah.
If you find a piece of railroad.
A portal,
Water
a
bottle.
pan, and a piece of railroad.
Oh, yeah. If you find a hidden portal, that's a pretty big indicator. It could be in there.
Spend all of your life savings trying to find it, too, if you could. That'd be great.
Yeah, that's a requirement.
It is.
Your wife has to leave you. Oh, goodness. Well,
You did it.
good job. You survived your first treasure segment. You're my treasure.
Oh, thanks.
I treasure you.
Oh.
All right. Sharesy feelsies on this long recording session. Everyone's pumped up, ready to share and feel.
Here we go.
Here we go.
What do you have, Alison? You never go first on Sharesy Feels.
Oh, I have a really upsetting documentary.
Great.
It's really good. It's very enraging. It's called Unseen. It's on Amazon Prime. If you have Amazon Prime where you watch UM, you'll get this for free too. It is about Anthony Sowell, who is a monster.
Okay.
And he murdered a bunch of women. He did it very poorly, but the women happened to be Black and drug addicted. So he was allowed to essentially kill 11 women, store them in his home as they stayed, and nobody bothered to find out where the smell was coming from.
Oh my God.
Basically. It's a lot like the Grim Sleeper, sort of, in that these women are just completely marginalized. Nobody cares what happens to them. They're disposable. And this guy was essentially able to function in broad daylight doing these things.
Ugh, horrible.
So it's really good. It's really well done. It's very upsetting. I definitely recommend it.
Okay, I will watch that. Eliza will not.
Mm-mm.
I might. It's just like, when
know,
am I
girl.
going to be like,
I
of
know,
all the
honey.
things to watch,
I know,
I'll
Bella.
sit down
I
and
know.
watch this murder
No.
document.
You
I
need
know,
to
Sastra.
buffer with
I
a
know.
bunch of brain candy first.
Yeah, of course.
I don't have anything I've watched or listened to, but I have a new craft to share.
Is that what you've been working on when we've been talking?
Yes, I cannot sit still and just not do anything with my hands.
Mm-hmm.
It's called Punch Needle, and
Oh,
if anyone is interested in crafts or embroidery, it's sort of like that, but it's faster and thicker, and you get to like stab a piece of cloth over and over. It's very satisfying.
Faster, thicker, and there's stabbing? What more?
How can you not? There are lots of cute like punch needle kits out there that you can buy to get you started, and it will just send everything that you need, which is really nice. And then a punch needle book that I have that I love is called Punch Needle Master the Art of Punch Needling Accessories. So it will teach you how to make like little purses or pillows. And
I didn't know you could make things.
Yeah, so you can finish it on the embroidery hoop, but then you can finish the edges, or you can and like sew it onto something, or you can make it in the shape of a pillow, like just a square, and then sew that with a back on it.
Gotcha. Cute.
It's fun, and that's written by Arauna Kunaraj.
Nice.
Fun. There's a bunch of kits on Etsy. That's where I got the one I got you for Christmas.
Yes, super cute. And then now I just have a bunch of punch needles, and I've started just like designing my own, which is really pretty simple and fun. I want to do more complex ones, but we'll see. It's fun.
That's awesome.
Cute. We've just been watching so many of the same things over. But I do want to say I am obsessed with the air fryer that Allison's husband gave my husband for Christmas.
Oh my God. What does it do?
You're air fryer people now.
Well, first of all, I was mad at him because I had gotten an attachment for our Instant Pot that would make it into an air fryer for him already.
Shit.
And then he got a fucking air fryer.
Oh, shit.
Which canceled out my gift.
Sorry.
But it's great. We've used it so many times. What
does it do? You can fry without oil?
Yes.
It's like a convection oven, right?
Yeah, but it's crispier than that. Like it does like a frying texture. Like we put fries in it last night. Honey,
you're too cute.
Crispy, delicious, no fatty oils. It's the best.
Awesome.
I do not understand the science of it. I need to know more.
Yeah, I think it's just because of the small size. It is basically convection oven, but it's concentrated. So, yeah,
I'm glad.
It's a game changer.
Makes me so happy. Yeah. Jamie listens to this, so he's going to hear you.
Yeah, he's going to hear that I was mad at him, and then I got over it really quickly when I ate some bacon wrapped scallops. So, yeah.
That's great. Nice.
Yeah.
All right. What are we talking about next episode?
Oh yes. We got a 4-parter, y'all.
Karlin's doing some heavy lifting next episode.
The first segment is a wanted segment about Patrick Mitchell.
And then the second is a Lost Loves about Victor Simon.
And then I have a wanted segment about Joe Smith.
And then an unexplained.
Ooh.
The Kelsey House. I haven't watched it yet, but I would assume there's ghosts inside.
Can't wait. All right, friends, thanks so much for listening, sticking with us. If you'd like to support the show and get more content from us, you can go to patreon.com/resolvedmysteriespodcast, and you'll get 2 extra episodes a month and a shout out on our main feed show, along with other goodies and early access to listener short stacks. And speaking of listener short stacks, please send us your stories for those so we can keep making them. You can send us stories about watching Unsolved Mysteries when you were a kid and being freaked out. We love those. Any nostalgia you have around the show, any current cases that are interesting you, we love to hear from you. We have an Instagram at Resolved Mysteries Podcast, and you can see photos there that we reference in the episode. We have Facebook and Twitter. We're at Resolve the Pod. And then the places to contact us, resolvedmysteriespodcast.com, resolvedmysteriespodcast@gmail.com, or at our P.O. Box 14005, Portland, Oregon 97293. If you enjoy this show, please subscribe and please leave a 5-star review, tell a friend, and you can help us help out the Trans Clippers Project this month because we are donating $1 to them for every review that we receive. And we love you.
Thanks, guys.
We sure do.
Thank you. Go find some treasure. Good luck.
Bring me
Start
back a
digging.
nug. But if it's any smaller than a hen egg, don't bother.
Yeah, don't bother.
We don't accept anything less. Bye.
Bye.
And at this point, my husband was in the room watching with me, and he was like, "Who's this guy?" And I was like, "He's an author and historian, obviously." He's like,
You're like, he's just a medium qualified white guy that UM uses.
And that's all the credentials you need.
That's all you need.
Yep.
Carry yourself with the confidence of a mediocre white guy.
Yep.
Pop quiz. What do America's first serial killer, a crime-solving parrot, Jimmy Hoffa, and yours truly have in common? We each honed our craft in the great state of Michigan. I'm Jen Carpenter, the host of So Dead, a true crime podcast where I take the cases I cover seriously. Myself? Not so much. If you want to take a deep dive into cases you've never heard before, I'm your girl. Just call me Scuba Jen. No, definitely don't do that. New episodes of So Dead are released on True Crime Tuesdays, and you can find me wherever you get your podcasts. I'll be waiting.
So dead, so dead. So